Hello and welcome to Vantage Point. I'm Marcia Boyles, and as always I'm delighted to introduce my partner, Kathleen Taylor, who is the clinical social worker at our medical center.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Kathleen. We have, I think today, a really interesting topic. It is change.
Yep.
Now, let's begin by acknowledging the fact that all living things clearly are in a constant state of change. Change occurs around us on a constant basis. I think particularly we humans, and perhaps particularly right now. Change can be what we perceive as good or bad, or large or small. And I think often we feel like our lives are shaped by change, that our destiny sometimes is change. Now today we're going to be acknowledging some changes going on here at Green Spring. We're not going to dwell on them, but just talk about them briefly, that are certainly affecting residents, and also changes that are associated with aging. Mm-hmm. What are you seeing in the way of change?
I think, as you said, change is a constant. And so what I'm interested in is why it is that we, as humans, react so strongly and often negatively to change. So that's one of the things I really want to focus on. And then the other thing is, since the way that we react to change is really very crucial to both our emotional and physical health, what are ways that we can learn some skills, some constructive ways to adapt to change?
All right, that sounds like an extremely important kind of message. Let's begin by talking. When you and I started our conversation about change, we were talking about the many construction changes inside and outside, particularly over a town center, but really all over the campus. And we were thinking, I was thinking particularly of other kinds of changes that we're seeing here at Green Spring, and there are many of them. Fairly recently, seems to be more than usual. Mm-hmm. We're seeing staffing changes, we're seeing service changes. When we go in the dining room, often the rules seem to have changed. Charges for things we hadn't had before, and in some cases, some services that we thought we needed, we're not seeing now. So the changes often are perceived as negative, but not always. There are certainly positive changes as well. So that really is the summary of what's going on at Green Spring. And we'll talk about aging changes after you talk about the importance of adapting to change. Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that, as you said, there's a lot of changes going on here at Green Spring. I always say we're the microcosm. The macrocosm is the rest of the world, and that's going a mile a minute. So what I think I'm seeing a lot is so many people are sort of at their tipping point in terms of being able to absorb all of the change that's occurring around them.
Both internally in terms of Green Spring and the world?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, in terms of their own particular life situations, add to it kind of the environmental stressors that might be occurring on campus, but then also add to it all of the different things that are going on in the news,
yes.
You know, that people are paying attention to, and that's just, you know, incrementally, that's just building up to a point where a lot of people are feeling an incredible amount of stress and anxiety. What I wanted to sort of lay the groundwork as far as where that might be coming from is why do we react so strongly to stress? And I find this so fascinating, but it really is something that we're hardwired to respond to. And as I've talked about the stress reaction, the fight or flight reaction so many times, it's really related to that. Our ability to perceive change or perceive threats and other kinds of changes in our environment are really important to our survival.
Yes, indeed.
You know, we had talked about if the bush is moving, you know, we need to know that it's not, you know, something that's behind it that's going to eat us. So as it happens, we react to change as a perceived threat. That's our immediate reaction.
Both physiologically and psychologically.
Well, you know, they're interrelated.
The fight or flight.
Yeah, so I mean, what happens is that we react with that flood of hormones and all of that, all of those reactions. So then what happens is that part of our nature is, as human beings, I think, is to try to control some of that by developing routines. You know, sort of some structure in our lives that allows us to feel that we have some control, that the world is predictable in some kind of way. And so I think that that's, you know, I see a lot of people use their routines, their daily routines as a nice way to kind of anchor their world.
Yes, and presumably that goes way, way back.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a way that that we do kind of shape our world in a way that makes it manageable. The problem with change is that a lot of times it can overwhelm our routine in some kind of way, and the world becomes less predictable, and that can cause us distress. That can cause us anxiety.
And we have less control.
And that's what we're reacting to, is that sense of less control. So, so the main thing that I wanted to then kind of talk about a little bit is, since we do like the idea of having structure, but we realize that the world, you know, is moving really quickly and that there's a lot of changes, how to balance our lives.
All right, balance, explain what you mean by that.
Well, balance is the idea that, you know, too much routine is not good either. If we're like locked into such a structured life that it's sort of like taken all the life out of the life, and we're only doing the things that we do every day, that's probably not a very healthy way to react. But if we're reacting to change in a way where we're just reacting all of the time, then that sort of puts us off balance too. So I think when I talk about balance, I'm talking about what I call the Goldilocks test. So it's
The Goldilocks test. Explain that one.
well, that is basically not too calm and not too chaotic, but just right.
I see. Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. I like that.
Yeah. So anyhow, how do we, knowing that our tendency is to develop routines, we kind of do that automatically. How do we learn ways that help us to be more adaptable, more flexible? And I think I've probably used the word resilience a lot, because resilience is about our ability to be able to adapt to change in a healthy way.
All right. Even seeking out change?
Yeah, sometimes, absolutely. That is, there are actually some different ways that we can train ourselves to be more comfortable with change. And actually, that's one of the really primary ones, is to notice, you know, are there places and points in our life where we never vary from particular,
It's called getting in a rut.
particular ways of doing things? Do you always have the same foods? Do you always eat in the same place? Do you always, you know, do something, not do something? So if you can identify those routines that have become rote, and think about tweaking them a little bit, and it probably isn't going to be anything too exceptional. It's like, okay, you know, today I'm eating at this restaurant instead of that restaurant.
Having Rice Krispies instead of Cheerios.
Right. But I think that people might be surprised that they do. I think it's like, okay, I eat at the same restaurant, I eat with the same people. All right, let's try to go to a different restaurant, maybe, you know, mix it up and not go with the same people. People might be surprised that they feel a little bit of anxiety about that, because it's thrown them off.
Okay.
So what I would then ask people to do is kind of embrace that feeling a little bit, because that's, you know, life.
Right. And it's a small adventure.
Yeah, it's a small adventure. And what it helps you do is to exercise your adaptability muscles, which is going to make you better able to react to change.
I like that notion. I don't think any of us have ever thought about having an adaptive muscle, but that's a good good image.
Right, yeah, I like that one too. So just try something new. I mean, just figure out, make that kind of a little challenge for yourself.
Yes.
Once a week, twice a week, just try something new. It doesn't have to be like gigantic, it can be pretty small.
Do people end up enjoying it? After
they get past the kind of discomfort a little bit, it's unsettling. I mean, we do like same, you know, we do like things mostly the same, because it's very reassuring.
It is, it's safe.
Another thing that you can do to really help with your resilience is to pay attention to how you are interpreting change. You sort of touched on that when you said change can be good or bad. Some people perceive change as blanket bad because it makes them so uncomfortable.
All right.
So when you are starting to, you know, I think the things that people might notice, which is another part of what I want to talk about, is when they're starting to feel anxious, if they're starting to get irritable, if they're starting to feel tense. Those are indicators that you're starting to have more stress. And if you're reacting strongly to things, you know, this is really bothering you for whatever reason, stop and ask yourself, you know, what are you reacting to here? And so, you know, an example would be, I don't know, give me an example of change, small example of change here at Green Spring.
Well, they may decide to take all the beef off the menu.
Wow.
Or almost all.
Right, so then that's gonna, you know, for people that get activated, that's gonna bring out some thoughts, and you know, those thoughts might be, you know, predominantly, you know, don't they know I like beef?
Right.
You know, what's wrong with them? We should have, you know. So it's just like all of these reactive kind of feelings that are contributing to your stress and your anxiety, and that makes you feel bad.
Yes, it does, and it makes angry, frustrated, stressed.
And it throws you off.
Yes,
and
it does.
And it really kind of can pretty much ruin your day. And you know, if it continues to build, it can kind of ruin more than your day. It can,
yes,
you know,
it can.
continue to make you miserable.
Well, and you also tend to make your friends miserable.
Yeah, yeah. So adjusting those thoughts, you know, sort of looking at those thoughts and adjusting them to be more adaptable, more manageable. I talk a lot about when you're under stress, you develop kind of black or white, either or ways of thinking. You know, so this is all bad, this is all good. So you got to find that balance a little bit in the way that you're reacting. Yeah, it's not great that we're not having beef, but you know, they're doing these really good chicken meals, so you know, this will be good for me too.
All right, now is this partly, is this lack of adaptability and when we feel stressed, partly because our cerebral processes are lessened? Is that part of the reactivity?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, that's the outcome of the reactivity is, you know, you switch from your thinking brain to your reactive brain. So you're feeling emotionally unsettled. You're mad, angry, unhappy. So great question, because it leads into another thing that I wanted to talk about, which is to being aware. When you're aware of those reactions, you really have to slow those reactions down before you can even think about what you're feeling. So the way that we do that is to, you know, things I say a million times, you know, slow your breathing down, you know, practice, you know, untensing your muscles, get yourself to a calm space.
Do you teach folks those simple breathing exercises?
They're the most powerful thing.
Yes, they are.
It's like magic, and I think people,
it is like magic.
People tend to not think that it should be as powerful as it is.
I know, it's amazing.
But once you experience it, It is. It's just really, really remarkable.
And so simple and easy to do.
Yeah. But first, you have to be aware. If you're reacting, you have to sort of pay attention to the fact that you are reacting in order to implement those skills. But the breathing is really, really important. And then, of course, the whole idea of focusing on what you can control and what you can't control. The old Serenity Now kind of idea that you really need to be able to recognize that there are things that are out of your control, and you can beat yourself up about them, but it doesn't really necessarily change anything, and really only makes you miserable.
And it's a matter sometimes of just talking yourself into, okay, I really need to accept this.
Well, I think, yeah, and that always sounds hard, because that kind of ends up being well, no, I don't. Why should I have to, accept this? That kind of always sort of, for me, it seems like it always engages us more in more resistance. It's just being able to flip the switch a little bit to see the more. There are positive things, that you can find. It might be hard, but it's a good exercise for you to see that though they've taken your favorite dish off the menu, that maybe there's a new dish that you might like.
Yeah, exactly.
All of that.
This is the time to try a new dish.
Yeah, this is exercise, and I know people go, "Oh, it sounds so hard, and why should I have to do it anyhow?" But because it exercises your resiliency muscle,
Right.
That's why you need to do it.
Right.
Another thing is to be in the present, which is to stay with the here and now, because a lot of times when people get anxious, they start to project their worry out into the future. So this is happening, that means this is going to happen, it's going to go on forever. They catastrophize, everything just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So staying in the present, grounding yourself right now in the moment. How am I doing right now? Not like in the hypothetical, next week, next year, whatever.
Now, how does one go about doing that?
Practice.
All right. Is that true? For heaven's sake.
Yeah. I think, again, the first thing is to be aware that you're doing it. Those, well, what if this happens?
Right.
Well, they did this, then this is going to happen next, and then this is going to happen, and then, as Chicken Little said, the sky will be falling.
Yeah, I was just, that's right.
So that's a habit. That's a habit that, people do fall into, especially when they're feeling threatened in some kind of way. Everything feels bigger and bigger.
Yes, and my own sense is that the more one does that, and if it's combined with isolation, social isolation, that can also exacerbate it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because that's having somebody around to kind of help you see another side, hopefully,
Right.
will help you with that balance too.
It does, and it's also a distraction.
Yep, and positive distraction is always good. Yeah, if you're sort of in your own head, ruminating and ruminating and ruminating, it's not going to end up well.
No, I think it doesn't.
We all know it doesn't.
Yeah, exactly.
We've all been there and done
Oh,
that.
yes, I dare say.
The other thing about being in the present is, while you're there, do something nice for yourself. And that is kind of a distractive kind of thing too. You have things that you can do that will give you pleasure, hopefully.
Give me some examples.
What do you know about yourself that's, helps you calm down, makes you feel good, is like, known to help you change the way that you're thinking in some kind of way? Reading a book. I'm thinking
Eating
for
a box
you.
of chocolates.
Eating a box of chocolate, playing music,
Right.
watching I love TV, so watching something on Netflix, who knows, but hopefully everybody has at least a couple of things that they can do
That are a treat.
that will will make them feel better, that's called self-care. That's taking care of yourself, because when you get into this mood where you're seeing everything so negatively, you're not taking good care of yourself.
No, that's right.
You're really, as I say, you're just making yourself unhappy. So let's, again, flip that, change that balance, change that direction, and practice good self-care.
Do you, when you talk to folks about that, is it a matter of people consciously being aware that they need to do that? I mean, is that part of the lesson here?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Pay attention to you. Pay attention to when you're feeling unhappy. Where's that coming from? You know, what are ways that you can change that around?
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, sort of underlying it all is the idea of what, you know, what are your priorities? You know, we can all choose to look around and get upset about all of the things that are happening in our lives and in the world. That's pretty easy for me to do.
Well, particularly right now.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, you know, it is perceived threat, but the threat, you know, is also about our, you know, what we believe in, what our values are, you know, what we think is important. When that feels threatened, it's a pretty real threat.
Yes,
so
it feels that way.
So I think that, you know, being able to kind of validate, you know, the importance of, you know, what you prioritize and what your values are, and live those, you know, in the space that you inhabit, you know, that can make a difference, and that can kind of help reestablish the fact that the world is not completely insane.
Well, we'll see. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So again, just trying to think of different ways to be flexible. You know, the minute you sort of get yourself into that anxious, stuck space where you don't feel like you can see anything positive,
Exactly.
is really a dangerous place to be.
Yes, and I think what you're pointing out is that there are tools to get you out of that place.
Yeah.
That any one of us could employ.
Yeah.
All right. Kathleen, I think those are valuable lessons. Presumably, if somebody feels totally stuck, they can come and talk to you, and you can point out some of these personal ways to get unstuck.
Yeah, I mean, I think some people get feeling so kind of, like they don't know how to move forward, and even if they have the techniques, it just feels too hard.
On their own.
On their own. And so, yeah, a lot of times going to you know, a mental health professional, therapist, counselor, we can kind of help support help you feel that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, that these things will work. You just have to, you know, you have to try, you have to continue to make the attempt, even because you're not going to get an immediate response all the time. You know, sometimes it's going to take some time, and resilience, you know, doesn't make all of the threats go away. You know, they're still there.
Right.
Real, perceived are real. It's just, you know, the idea that you'll be able to respond in a way that will hopefully promote your sense of health and well-being over time. Not that you're not going to have down times, because everybody has down times.
Of course, of course. And I think most of us have learned some of those techniques by now. But there are times when everybody gets stuck.
Yeah.
And it would be helpful to be able to come in and discuss them. Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges in aging, because there certainly are some very special kinds of stressors that we're seeing, although certainly every age has got its own set of stressors.
Right.
What are you seeing as some of the primary stressors here?
Actually, it's just a continuation of what we were talking about, which is just adjustment to changes in your life that have always been part of who you are. You know, that your life has, you know, these are the things that you've done. certainly coming into the community from your home, outside home, and in all of those changes, when people come in, those take an enormous amount of adjustment.
Giving up a home, a yard, a way of life.
Yeah, the predictability of what you know. You're exchanging the predictability of what you know, what you trust, where you feel safe, to a lot of really unknown. And again, being able to open yourself to these new experiences, having that resilience to be able to adjust to those changes makes all the difference. But it's hard, and some people have a harder time than others, for sure.
Well, we talked a little bit about the notion of grieving for your past life, your house, your yard, your independence, all kinds of things. Yes, Green Spring is a very different kind of environment than almost any of us have had experienced before. In addition to that, we're facing not just the physical changes in ourselves, but in our friends as well. We're losing friends and neighbors for health reasons. So there's certainly a number of changes that we're seeing associated with aging that sometimes we have not seen. We have no models for them very often.
Yeah, exactly right. So there goes the ability to predict, huh? Because you don't really have a model. You've not ever been there so much before. But yeah, as people now our residents, our oldest residents have been here maybe
21 years.
So definitely, the hallway is the neighborhood at Green Spring. And so knowing that, you can look at the apartments and you can remember, who's been there, who's still there, new people coming in, all of that really, it does shake the predictability, and it does generate some anxiety because, you're seeing those changes in real time, outside your doorway.
Well, you've heard me use this quote before, but Karl Marx, the German philosopher, said that old age is the least anticipated condition of man. And I think this is true. We just didn't ever envision quite ourselves getting old and all the changes that occur with it.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. These are unexpected
times.
Changes.
Yeah, unexpected times, and I think that, and I do see, people kind of grappling with that in terms of most of our residents have bonus years, as I say, that there are years to their life that they really didn't anticipate. And it's like, now what do I do, right?
Yes, exactly. Who am I now?
Yeah, but I think a lot of people are they had calibrated, their thoughts to say this was going to be kind of where I would be done. And instead they're living 10, 15, 20 years more.
Yes.
And there's some frustration there because it does take a lot of energy now to continue to go, who am I now?
Yes, it does.
And be able to see that as that change in your perception of your life as, a new adventure as opposed to not something that you necessarily wanted to do.
That's a good way of putting it. Yes, exactly right.